everyone, and welcome to the first senior capstone session. And this is Braden Wehr, and we'll be talking about sports. And this session is called Going, Going, Gone.
Baseball was, is, and always will be, to me, the best game in the world. Many of you have probably heard this quote by Babe Ruth before, but how many of you have heard this quote by Willie Stargell, who is a 7-time All-Star for the Pittsburgh Pirates? To me, baseball has always been a reflection of life. Like life, it adjusts and it survives everything. Baseball is clearly my favorite sport, and this is for a couple of different reasons. The first, because it is the only sport that you can succeed only 3 out of 10 times and still be considered one of the best players to ever play the game. Second, because you can't take a knee with 2 minutes on the clock and run the timeout. You have to give the other team their chance, their full 27 outs. And lastly, because baseball reflects so many different aspects of life. It reflects the joys, the troubles, and the amount of dedication required to succeed. As Ernie Harnwell, a baseball broadcaster of 55 years, once said, "Baseball is a lot like life. It's a day-to-day existence full of ups and downs. You make the most of your opportunities in baseball as you do in life." This year through baseball, I settled in on wanting to pursue the virtues of courage and patience, mostly because those were both virtues that I knew I would need if I wanted to pursue any aspect of baseball as my career, but also because I knew that they were virtues I lacked in my everyday life. The main goal of my capstone was originally to seek out and learn more about how a sports announcer or broadcaster lives their daily life and what opportunities that brings about for them socially. But this shifted more to the influence I can have on kids through sports for reasons that I'm going to discuss later. I thought sports media would satisfy my desires of having a job that I thoroughly enjoyed, as well as allowing me to better society. But as I learned more about this, I still felt that something was missing. God created within me a love and desire for sports and competitiveness, which drove me to search for a way to make our games more honorable to God. Oftentimes within a sports world, I am so disappointed in the lack of humility and love that I see our athletes and announcers showing towards one another. Within a sports game, it is so often missed that a grace-filled space can coincide with the competitive culture in a game. Paul writes in 1 Corinthians 9:24-25, "Do you not note that in a race all the runners run, but only one gets the prize? Run in such a way as to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the games goes into strict training. They do it to get a crown that will not last, but we do it to get a crown that will last forever." This verse captures the exact nature of the competitiveness I wish to see in our sports today. Paul tells us that we should compete and train as if we are going to win, but to remember that we are part of a bigger race with an eternal prize waiting for us. Throughout the competition, we must hold ourselves accountable and have a competitive nature, but maintain humility and kindness throughout the competition. As I looked back and reflected on my experiences, I found that I learned a couple of different things. The first, that God wanted to teach me perseverance as much as he wanted to teach me courage and patience. One of the men that I had the privilege of interviewing was Mr. Alan Roach. He is an incredible man, but first I want to tell you a little bit more about some of his own accomplishments and who he is so that his advice that he gave me weighs a little bit heavier on you guys. Mr. Roach has done the PA announcing for professional teams for years. To specify, the PA announcer is the voice inside of the stadium that says, "Now batting, number 28, Nolan Arenado," or "Tackle made by number 58, Von Miller," etc. Specifically, he has done the Broncos and Vikings games for multiple seasons, nearly every home game for the Colorado Avalanche over the past couple of years, multiple Super Bowls, World Cup matches, Olympic games, All-Star games, and the Rockies games for around 15 years. However, even he started in radio, and it's crazy to think that he's in the exact same place that I am today when he started his career. For him, it all started with a school project where he had to go to a studio to record something. And that project led to him receiving a job at that very studio. Because of this job, he was able to form a relationship with a person who helped him immensely. This relationship led to an opportunity where he was able to ask if he could do the PA announcing for the Sky Sox, a minor league baseball team down in Colorado Springs. This courageous step of faith led him to receiving the PA job for the Colorado Rockies in one of their first seasons. And from there, he has gone on to do everything else that I have already mentioned to you. I tell you all of this so that you may better understand the lesson that I have learned. What Mr. Roach taught me is that each and every day you need to be doing something to help you achieve your goals. That is how you reach them and become your own version of success. This can be something as small as sending a text message to someone who can help you out, or reading a book, or as bold as going out and applying for a job. But no matter what you do, you have to do something every day to get better, because if you remain complacent and don't do anything, you'll never reach your goals and become your own version of success. Being proactive is the key to any form of success. I was also able to exchange emails with the current Rockies radio broadcaster, Jerry Schemmel. Jerry is an amazing guy, and he is an incredible story of faith. He's a survivor of a plane crash where he ran back into the flames to pull out a screaming child and save their life. And he also organizes yearly bike races to raise money for various causes. Mr. Schemmel shared with me some of the very same advice that Mr. Roach did about perseverance in achieving your goals. But he also told me that when it comes to choosing a career, you should never do it because anyone else tells you to do it or because of the money that it may bring in, but simply because you want to do it and you feel that God is calling you to do it. Don't get me wrong, I definitely had to exercise courage and patience while I set up these interviews. That took a long time to pursue, and it took a great deal of courage to reach out to men of such figure. And I do believe that God has rewarded me for seeking out these virtues. However, instead of learning only about courage and patience, I was able to learn a great lesson about perseverance, and it turned out to be a far greater lesson than I had ever expected to be taught. I was also able to sit down and chat with Mr. Downs. He is the preschool director at Front Range. He played professional baseball for the Pittsburgh Pirates for a couple of years and is an outstanding man of God. I'm very grateful to him for being open enough to sharing with me a story that is very close to his heart. He told me a story of a person that he's very close with who had the opportunity to play basketball at a college level. Unfortunately, this person got caught up in the drinking and the partying and threw that opportunity away. Thankfully, this person has done a complete 180 and turned their life back around to following Jesus. I tell you this specific story for all of you young kids out there that don't think one small decision in your life can ruin it. Because for this man it did, and it cost him his dream. So as Mr. Downs said, make every decision you make in life count, and make it assuming that it could affect the rest of your life. Because for this man it did, and one silly mistake can send you into places that you do not want to go. One of my favorite parts of this experience was being able to listen and soak in all of the stories that Mr. Roach shared with me. Because of time, I can only share one with you. Mr. Roach shared with me a story of a time when he was over in Brazil announcing an Olympic boxing match between a Brazilian and another competitor. It is important to know that Brazil had never won a gold medal in boxing ever. But in this specific match, the Brazilian ended up winning, and Mr. Roach could remember the Brazilian PA announcer screaming in Portuguese the name of the Brazilian victor. After that, this person even started crying because they were so overjoyed for their country. Because for the country of Brazil, this was more than just a boxing match. This was history. God also showed me that He doesn't want me to follow this path. At first, I was a little troubled by this and semi-angry because of it. I had spent most of my capstone listening and soaking in all of these once-in-a-lifetime opportunities that Mr. Roach had shared with me. And in my head, I had already kind of began to experience them myself. But slowly God showed me why He didn't want me to continue to pursue this occupation. One of my goals in life has always been to have a family and a wife and kids that I love with everything I have. And this profession, as amazing and wonderful and rewarding as it may be, would take away from the time that I was able to spend with my family. God began to show me this through the interviews that I had with both Mr. Roach and Mr. Schemmel. Both of these men were adamant about the difficulties that this occupation put on their families. For most of the year, these men are traveling and are away from home. Mr. Roach explained to me how he is an amazing wife that allows him to do what he is able to do because she is willing to sacrifice some of her own opportunities and take on more tasks around the house. I want to be there and experience that life with my family, though, and spend that kind of time with them. Because to me, it is more important to be there and be around my family and enjoy those moments with them than to continue to pursue this dream. I also began to learn more about the disappointments of the job through a book I read called From Sports Fan to Sportscaster. It was written by a former baseball broadcaster, Vinny Muccici. Within his writing, he did a lot of things that I really admired. He highlighted the personalities of the players and made an effort to portray them as more than just the athletic gods that we often make them out to be. He told wonderful stories and highlighted his dislikes and likes of the job. However, he also exploited the corruption that the media has within the sports world and the downfalls of it. He shared stories of broadcasters he saw manipulating the players' answers just so they could have a killer headline for their story. And he also shared stories of broadcasters that he saw. He also ridiculed the broadcasters for the way that they viewed the players, because so often these guys seem to forget that these athletes are human beings too. This was something that I was very pleased about, given my beliefs on the competitiveness of sports in the first place. All of these things affirmed my new reality that I couldn't continue to pursue this job. But thankfully God didn't just kill my hopes and aspirations. He showed me an even better alternative. He slowly began this process without me even knowing when I volunteered at baseball tryouts through the South Jeffco Sports Association. I was able to lead some of the younger age groups through stretches and share with them some of my own advice on how to try out based on my own experiences. After that, I did a lot of different things. I was able to hit them fly balls and ground balls, shag their batting practice, catch the pitchers as their coaches were evaluating them, and overall, it was a great experience. While it was sometimes difficult to keep some of the younger guys in numerical order or get them to focus, in which I learned a great deal of patience and perseverance, it was totally worth it. This was the seed that God had planted within me to coach. Because it was a tryout, I wasn't actually able to help these kids improve their skills or get to know them at all, and this left me wanting more. I wanted to be able to learn more about these kids' stories and hear why they loved playing baseball, as well as being able to help them get better. So I took these aspirations with me into my second semester. Again, with the help of Mr. Downs, I was able to put on a baseball camp for 6 players between the ages of 12 and 14. I specifically designed the camp to help them work on the 3 specific skills that are most often used in baseball: pitching, hitting, and fielding. I had specific drills that I had designed that I wanted for them to work on so that they could work on specific areas within those 3 skills. Things such as their off-speed pitches, hitting to the opposite field, and their lateral movement for fielding. My favorite part, however, was being able to share with them a little bit about my advice for high school baseball because they were so close to it. I was able to pass on to them the advice that Mr. Roach had given me, as well as share with them how important I felt it was to be a good person and a good friend in high school. I shared with them a little bit more about my capstone and how I had wished them to see them compete with humility and strive to find that grace-filled space that I have been talking about. Through this, I learned that I am excited to coach my own kids when they are old enough to play. Watching Mr. Downs interact with the kids and interacting with them myself, I realized a couple of different things. The first, that the players impact their coaches' lives, and second, that the coaches impact their players' lives heavily. Coming from my own experiences, I know the values of having a coach that is invested in you and cares about you deeply. And that is exactly what I am most excited about, to impact the kids' lives as they play the game that we both love. Through this, I hope to encourage the kids that I coach to compete with a humble heart and to remember that athletics can also contain that grace-filled space that I've been talking about. I want to continue to teach the kids that I coach, whenever that may be, to compete humbly and to win humbly and to lose graciously. 2 Timothy 2:5 says, "An athlete is not crowned unless he competes according to the rules." And that is exactly what I'm eager to teach the young players that I coach. These kids also taught me a lot. At such a young age, they were so excited and happy. Not one of them cared about who was coaching them or who was evaluating them, but simply that they were out playing baseball with their friends and trying to get better. Going through my senior season of both baseball and football, there is a certain amount of unwanted pressure that somehow gets placed upon your shoulders. Some of it is by my own doing, because I expect myself to succeed and I desire to win, but some of it is also just comes simply from the fact that I'm the oldest on the field. Playing quarterback this year for a high school is some of the most pressure that I've ever felt on a sports field before, and I wish that I would approach that season with the same amount of joy that these kids carried with them. That has been one of my goals as I am in the midst of my final season of high school baseball, to have fun and make it a season that I'll never forget, and to allow the joy that comes with playing baseball to take over the struggles and the pressures and the troubles that I may have throughout my season. I'll admit that I have not completely succeeded at this due to my own desire to win and do better, but it has been a nice reminder and goal to continue to strive for this season. God has shown me a lot throughout this experience and continued to make me aware of His presence and plan. While I was at first disappointed with God's new plan, I have become at peace with his decision and am excited to see what else he has in store for me. It has been an amazing experience to see how God had used the virtues of grace and patience and perseverance and courage, and how those were all things that I sought to find on a sports field, but how God had really wanted me to learn them so that I could use them in a different area of my life. I learned that God had showed me these virtues because I actually needed them more in a different area. Recently, I had the opportunity to attempt to share the gospel with a family member. I was incredibly nervous and anxious because of this, because I was afraid of the reaction that I would get. Now, as I continue to wait and pray for the seed that I planted inside of him to flourish, I recognize that grace and patience and courage and perseverance were all virtues that I was readily equipped with because of this capstone. It was amazing to see God's amazing power and how he had a completely different use for the plans that I thought I had. How I needed courage to step into that room and initiate a conversation despite the potential consequences, and how I now have to exercise every bit of patience and perseverance that I have learned as I wait and hope for a positive outcome. I'm also excited to continue on into the next phase of my life where I can continue to share and experience God's love. I'm eager to see how God uses my desire to help young athletes get better, to better his kingdom. I believe wholeheartedly that sports, especially baseball, can shape a kid into a man. I hope that God gives me the opportunity to coach my own children and enables me to bond with them through sports like I did with my dad and my family as a young kid. I also cannot wait to see what God has planned for me as a future parent and man. I am confident he will give me the skills necessary to parent my children well, to encourage my family in whatever they set their mind to, and to make it known to them that I believe they can accomplish whatever they decide to do with their life. I hope to teach them the valuable lessons that can be learned from a team atmosphere and to show them that grace-filled space that should exist within a sports world. I hope to continue to approach my life with the open heart that God showed me I needed and to be flexible with whatever his plans are for me in the future. I know that God will give me the ability to establish in my family the confidence they will need to succeed and to love them immensely. I have a great hope that he will shape me into the man that he wants me to be and continue to use me a vessel to better his kingdom in both my everyday life and the sports atmosphere. Thank you.